Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Smarter Building podcast powered by Symetri, where we talk all things construction and its evolving digital landscape. As part of this evolution, we're seeing more and more progressive visualization and AI tools being adopted in the industry. So on today's show, I'm joined by Nick John, Industrial Design and Visualization Manager at Symetri. Thank you for joining us, Nick. It's great to have you.
Pleasure.
So as I touched on, Nick's job title is Industrial Design and Visualization Manager, which, to put it simply, Nick's job is to identify, explore, and organise technology that can reduce the distance between concept and reality, but within the manufacturing industry, primarily automotive, industrial design, and visualisation sectors. Now, we've also seen that Nick, or you guys might have also seen, he's quite active on LinkedIn and is always keeping up with the latest trends on this topic and posting thought-provoking content in this area. So we're hoping today to draw from his expertise and find out what is trending in the world of visualization and, more importantly, how this can translate to the construction industry. But before we get into all of that, Nick, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background and your passions?
Sure. My background is as a designer, industrial designer, predominantly with consumer products before joining the Autodesk channel, which I've been in for nearly 15 years, actually, on and off, with some long-term loans into industry. But yeah, primarily moving from design, working in engineering, then there's a sort of focus on automotive, more into surface modeling in particular. And a big part of what I do is developing the community of surface modelers across the UK and Northern Europe, predominantly looking after the large OEMs, that are the household names, but in recent years been a real big focus on startups and a real hotbed of automotive in the UK, with a lot of the EV startups and smaller studios, which have been amazing for this kind of ecosystem over here. And naturally in automotive, you end up working quite heavily in visualization as well, and they're my sort of main focuses. As you said, something people wouldn't know about me.
Yeah, so just a general factor that people might not know about you, even in Symetri.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people know in Symetri I do love my football. Still play or try to. But yeah, they're my two passions are design and football, really. So there's a lot that I've learned about, I guess, the team building from sport that I actually bring into building ecosystems and building communities. So it's actually surprisingly useful, believe it or not.
And what team do you support, more importantly?
Yeah, to ask that question. I'm a long-suffering West Brom fan.
We'll move on.
Yeah, that's probably for the best.
And so what does your daily job role as Industrial Design and Visualization Manager involve at Symetri?
Yeah, historically, it's been to support the design studios primarily. So the designers and their strategy to speed up the design process, make things more efficient, increase the productivity of their teams across all of the different areas. So very early conceptual design through to design realization, visualization, all the way down to sales and marketing, actually. And what most people will realize is that the automotive process, or at least the speed of bringing vehicles out, has been reduced over the last 15 years. And the way to do that is either by increasing your headcount or making the teams that you already have more efficient. So that's what we focus on, is making these teams more efficient with the right tools and technologies and expertise. And then we've got a small ID&V team within Symetri who focus on everything from digital modeling, traditional visualization like statics, animations, sales and marketing assets, and real time, which includes Unity and Unreal. And as ID&V manager, my focus personally is on automotive because that's the department I run. But ID&V can spread into manufacturing, industrial machinery, architecture, engineering, construction. So I find myself working with a lot of these different parts of Symetri and lending the knowledge that we've gained over the years.
So yeah, that's obviously a lot that you do. So how do you keep up with controlling all of that, and how do you keep up with, what's hot, what's trending? That must be a challenge in itself in your daily role.
I enjoy it. That's the long and short of it. As I really do enjoy that part of the job, which is to maintain a level of awareness of the different technologies that influence what we do. And it's paid dividends over the years. It just means that the fact that I enjoy the struggle of learning new technology, and then trying to democratize that to the team, and then collectively we'll evaluate what we think is a viable tool or technology versus what we think is not necessarily ready for market or fit for purpose yet, is really important. So what we've done is build a robust filter. So although there's a huge amount of noise, we only really focus on the signals, the things that pass our tests that we feel would be useful for us internally or useful for our customers. So yes, it does look like we touch a huge amount of technologies, but in reality, once we've applied our filter to it, there's not quite as many that we have to necessarily try to evaluate.
Makes sense, yeah. And just to maybe touch a bit more on the actual topic of visualization, we're seeing it thrown around in many different industries. And as we have just alluded to, it is such a broad topic. Could you briefly describe what it is or what it means for us and what it can involve?
Okay. Yeah. So if I say visualization, typically people will jump to creating images and animation, or creating some sort of content that can be consumed visually. And that is correct. All of those things are facts. But visualization is important because regardless of the CRM system or the cloud solution or the PDM situation that a company has in place, the vast majority of productivity waste, efficiency wastes, and problems are actually from miscommunication. Yeah. Miscommunication between two parties is typically the reason why things have been halted, paused, stopped, broken. And what we try and do is just bring departments close together through visualization. And that may be your traditional areas like sales and marketing, design review, but that also extends to training, health and safety, onboarding, even supplier sign-offs and things like that. What we try and do is supplement all of the existing information that we might have, and then use visual assets, which might be images, animations, real-time assets, extended reality, which is VR, AR, mixed reality, and use these tools to really reduce those miscommunications, take away language barriers, take away geographic barriers, take away single points of failure, which we all found out we all had during the pandemic. And we found visualization is one of those, I'd say, fairly simple strategies to implement, which can avoid a lot of those issues.
And it's interesting you say that because, all sort of speaking one language, because like we've seen yesterday, an announcement from Vario, one of our partners, when they're now linking up with Twinmotion, which is all across the AEC sector. So it's interesting that your take on it is that we're simplifying and we're trying to create one communication, one language across different barriers. So that's a really interesting point.
That's it. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an exciting one to keep an eye on, actually. Twinmotion, Vario, and Symetri. That's a unique value proposition.
I guess that leads on to our next point. So can you give us some examples of any companies and projects you're working on, and how they're leading the way in the areas of visualization?
Yeah, we've got a long history of working with large organizations. I think most people know my background in terms of the big OEMs that we've supported over the years, and we still do that. We love working with those household names, and their strategies are almost meticulously refined at this point. They're perfect. But what we found has been really interesting is what we can do with startups. Yeah, smaller companies, small organizations who may not have the resources of the large incumbents, and they have to approach things differently. They have to try and negotiate the complexities of their industry without that capital, without the headcount, and without necessarily the offices. And what we've been able to do with a couple of automotive startups and also engineering and architectural startups in the last year or so have been to build visualization strategies from the inception of the company. Yeah, they've got really talented designers, really, I guess, forward-thinking C-suites and MDs and decision makers who have realized very quickly there's no point in trying to replicate some of the old models, workflows, because we can't necessarily compete in that way. So they've adopted, we can call them clean design studios, but they're trying not to do too much prototyping, not trying to do too much flying and traveling and reducing those overheads. And they've adopted visualization immediately. So believe it or not, they've got all of their staff, or the vast majority of their staff, have got access to either a visualization portal or a VR headset, and they've deployed remote collaboration from the get-go. What that means is that these companies have been able to work, I say fairly smoothly throughout the pandemic, because they didn't rely on an office necessarily. So there was no issue with them not being able to travel. They didn't have prototypes or sites that they wanted to go and visit, because they could distribute these VR one-to-one scale assets, which people could review from the comfort of their homes, which maintained any of the design processes. And some of the other ones who've really pushed it even further, they're starting to build pipelines or data pipelines where they can do pretty much everything. It's got their BIM baked in, it's got their geometry process baked in, their stakeholder meetings, their sign-off procedures. And it's really interesting seeing the smaller companies adopt a lot of the new technology to compete directly with some of the larger incumbents. And a lot of that has been down to the way that they've been able to present and review their data through visualization.
And another thing you mentioned there, which is interesting, like you said, a lot of companies sort of have like a headset lying around, but they might not necessarily do much with it. And what do you think one of the key challenges is for people to get on board and adopt it? Is it, like you mentioned, data? Or, what do you think one of the key issues is for encouraging people to embrace this technology?
Yeah, I mean, encouraging people to embrace it is part of the battle, but this is why we always talk about a visualization strategy, because unfortunately we're all guilty of it. Lots of our clients are guilty of it as well, which is, I want this new thing because I've got this particular problem. And when it alleviates that problem, the need of that, VR system might disappear. When we talk about a visualization strategy, we then look at, let's use what you said a second ago, the VR headset. We don't just look at it to solve a problem. We would invite other people from the business to see how it might add value to their business practices. So we've seen companies purchase a headset for a very specific stakeholder meeting. Stakeholder meeting goes really well, might not use it again. But when you have a strategy, you might invite your sales and marketing team, you might invite the design team, engineering team, even the simulation team, and everybody starts to see extra value where, okay, I didn't realize I could do that with the headset, or I didn't realize I could do that with visualization. And all of a sudden, this point solution, this headset, which was there for one specific use case, is adding value to multiple departments. And it's also connecting departments. It means that people now can see things with less ambiguity, or understand exactly what department A is explaining when it might not be quite as well understood by department B. And that's how we see it. It's almost like the glue sometimes that connects departments.
And at what point or stage do you find people start to look at this sort of strategy? What stage should organisations be at in their data or digital journey before looking to put something like that in place?
Ideally, 3D data. That's the main thing. If you want to be able to take advantage of this technology yourself without outsourcing it all the time, then you want 3D data. And that is one of the big things with, I guess, construction and architecture in particular, is this last sort of 10 years has been a migration from 2D to 3D, which means the vast majority of those organizations who may not have seen the value of being able to do this themselves a decade ago might still hold some of those preconceptions today. But in reality, if you've got that 3D data, we want our customers to extract as much value from that as possible. And that could be, yes, simulation data, it could be BIM data, but visualization is this low-hanging fruit. The CAD data's there, the effort and energy has been put into it. It's just an extra bit of value that you can extract and then deploy internally or use it for external meetings or external use cases as well. But the main thing is you want 3D data and you want a real use case for it, because that's when you'll start to appreciate what you have as a business, as opposed to it's too difficult for us, we'll outsource it. Nothing wrong with that, but when you appreciate what you have, I think people then start to use it to a greater degree.
And then where do you think, you touched on, we've had this sort of 10-year transition in the AEC industry, but where do you think the industry is in terms of adoption of visualization and these tools in comparison to the manufacturing industries?
I think architecture is actually pretty advanced, and construction is advancing quickly as well. I would argue that maybe automotive has got a more established position for visualization, because you won't have seen a car advert in the last 10 years which doesn't feature at least some level of CGI, because again, automotive understand the value of that asset very well. So I'm not getting away any trade secrets, but in automotive, you spend a huge amount of time creating the design, going through the process of refining that design to the point where it's production ready. But in a lot of other industries, that production ready CAD file then gets manufactured or prototyped or created. In automotive, they kind of take a little diversion. So that CAD file immediately almost goes to the end of the line, to sales and marketing. So people start using that file, which is typically for production, for sales and marketing, which is then used for configurators. So if you buy a car, the first thing you do is go to an automotive configurator. You're not going to go to the showroom necessarily these days. That's exactly what automotive do. They start selling the product way before it's necessarily even ready. And there's loads of value in that, because now you start to understand what people like, what kind of configurations are users looking for in different regions around the world. This is brilliant, because now the designers know exactly which ones to make, or which ones they should really be producing more of as opposed to less of. So you're getting this immediate data. And then you've got the adverts and things like that, which are all, as I say, predominantly CGI, which is a massive advantage, because normally you'd have to create a show car, ship it to some part of the world, close the roads, avoid any drones or people trying to take photos of the new vehicle, insurance, shipping, health and safety, putting up the marketing team. Huge overheads are just eliminated because we can go straight to Viz. Construction has got different aims and objectives, predominantly sort of health and safety, or augmented reality to see behind walls and to see behind certain elements of the design. So it's not quite the same, but there's huge opportunities to kind of take some of those extra values that we know work in automotive and use them in construction and architecture, now that we've got that 3D data in much the same way automotive has done for the last 15, 20 years. So lots of value to be gained. I'd say automotive is not necessarily ahead, but it's a more refined process. They understand exactly where to use visualization and when, whereas I'd say construction, architecture know the low-hanging fruit of where to use it. Now it's going to be a case of expanding what they can do.
I think the issue with construction companies is their sort of current trading conditions, their spiraling costs, labour shortages, increasing legislation, and of course a key focus on sustainability. So I think you mentioned, automotive there's loads of stuff around sustainability that we could try to cut down on there. But I think it's just how do we try to encourage these organisations, and what are the key things that we can compare from the automotive industry on those sorts of issues?
You said a great one there, which is sustainability. Whether it's B Corps, or whether it is a something that's mandated within a company to say we're going to be X% more sustainable by a certain target year or target time period. Visualization is a great way to reduce a huge amount of material and waste and overheads that would be associated to sustainability goals. I know that people in Symetri are going to have not the IKEA one again, but IKEA is a great example. The IKEA catalogue was one of the most circulated publications in the world. I think it was the third most circulated publication in 2021 after the Bible and the Quran. So they had a pretty good market share of being able to distribute their sales and marketing material. But over the years, IKEA had slowly started to take out a lot of the traditional photography and replaced it with digital visualization, CGI. So, they started off with a chair in the early 2000s, and that slowly progressed into 10% of things you saw in the catalogue was CGI, 40%, 70%. And by the time we were at 2021, when the catalogue ended, I think it was 2021, pretty much the whole catalogue is CGI. And they thought very quickly, well, we don't need to necessarily distribute this if we've got these assets. It costs a huge amount to create that publication every year. So they stopped it. Because the other thing about it is it's quite wasteful. Even if it was a recycled material catalogue, it still has an environmental impact. And for IKEA, that's something that's core to their values. So got rid of the catalogue, saved a huge amount of money on prototyping, which used to be the physical photography, and essentially put all of that capital back into the business for R&D. And this is the reason why you've got IKEA AR apps. If you go to IKEA now, you'll be able to put a sofa in your room. They've got a digital catalogue. They've got a VR strategy. They're actually one of the most digital savvy companies in the world. And the other thing is they have to convey their products to hundreds of territories around the world. Whereas you could do that, or you could just have one digital strategy and let that strategy work across the globe, as opposed to having 70 or 80 different catalogues with different languages of different texts, with different rooms, because a room in America for the IKEA catalogue is not going to be the same as a room in China or a kitchen in China, because they're significantly smaller. So every single region's got these very specific nuances. You can imagine the difficulty of trying to maintain these marketing materials. So one digital strategy means they can do a one-to-many, as opposed to trying to create all these different versions for different regions. So lots of opportunities.
And then you touched on AR is sort of being used in the construction industry to see sort of through walls, behind walls, all that kind of stuff. Is there anything else or are you seeing like a forward-thinking construction company that maybe people should look out for more, or are there any particular examples where you can see it kind of expanding?
Well, I know that the construction team at Symetri are partnering with a number of companies like Oculo. We know about nice these platforms like Twinmotion, brilliant. We work with Unity very closely at Symetri as well. And we've got a number of projects I don't think I'm at liberty to talk about. But the things which I'm most interested in at present would be the AI integration of visualization. So for design reviews and for stakeholder meetings, even if we get people into VR or into an AR headset, there's still a certain amount of onboarding at the minute. Teaching people how to use it, teaching people how to operate it. It's significantly easier than it was back in the day, but the sort of the advent of these large language models means that people can use natural language to operate these design review assets. And we've got one particular project for customer that I remain nameless for the moment, where they're able to walk on site and essentially ask for certain types of the data to kind of emerge, or you could walk around an as-built environment. As long as you've got the data available, we can say, I want to see the HVAC, and it will know exactly what to remove and what to add in the scene. Or I would like to see the electrical data. Again, does exactly what you'd expect it to do. Hides and shows the right things. I'd like to see the architectural data. The way that I'm seeing this done actually quite nicely integrating to Autodesk with one of the tools we use for automotive called VRED is via NVIDIA Project Melon, bit of a strange name, but that one actually plugs directly into VRED, low code solution, and you can drive all of the different variants of a vehicle just with natural language. So maybe not with my cold and a Brummie accent, but definitely just normal natural language to open the doors, change the color to red, hide the wheels. And as long as you've got those variants available and you programmed in the appropriate logic, all of a sudden you don't have any barriers to entry for certain stakeholders. Because that's something we've always struggled with. If we've got someone in the C-suite, for example, MD, CEO, or even, because we work with a lot of, I'd say, famous or people in the public eye, they're always a bit reluctant to be the guinea pig in the headset or the guinea pig to be using some of the tools. But the second you put the headset on, you can use natural language, all of that evaporates. All of the concerns that you might do things incorrectly, the learning curve just disappears, because you just essentially talk to your asset as if you know it, because you're asking for things that you'd expect to do. Then the other one, I think, which is quite interesting, which we need to do more of at Symetri, is our Viz table. So we've created and developed our own solutions at Symetri under the Savilia, the Navigate umbrella, and one of them is called the Symetri Viz table, which means you don't have to put on a headset, you don't necessarily even have to remember a load of hotkeys. You will just walk through a site just using a little puck on a visualization table, and that will actually help you navigate around the site. We found that's one of the nicest ways for people to just very, very quickly interact with the scene without any real barriers to getting involved. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think it's more about now, like, sort of how far away do you think we are in the industry from people starting to adopt this stuff, or even start to think about it as part of a strategy, like you said? I mean, it's very different from the traditional design processes and construction processes of today. So yeah, how do we start to impact that, and how far away do you think we are?
I think the opportunity is there. It's there for anyone who wants to take advantage of it. At the end of the day, everything is very competitive these days. The costs are going up. Teams are more competitive for talent. And one of the easier ways to alleviate some of those problems is by deploying innovative solutions, because it attracts a certain caliber of talent. It sells your capabilities better to your audience, and the overheads that people used to kind of assume in terms of the cost for some of these softwares and hardware, they've come down by sort of tenfold. And we know that a lot of companies will have looked at this 10 years ago, maybe longer, to how do we get into visualization, how do we get into VR, how do we get into XR, and they would have had a price point which was pretty high in the grand scheme of things. But now those price points are significantly reduced depending on what you're looking for, and they pay for themselves very quickly. You spot one mistake, which we've done. We've actually been to demos and people have given us the data on the morning, and by the afternoon they've spotted problems on site, and then they've actually kind of made some quick phone calls to suppliers to say, we need to halt this or we need to stop that. And that's one of the best showcases of how accessible this stuff is that just reviewing your data in a better state is just so valuable for decision making. So I've gone around the houses with your answer, but long and short of it is the tools and technologies are there. Increasingly companies are going to be adopting it. So the level of competitiveness between organizations is going to increase. So I would almost assume, if I was in construction or manufacturing or automotive, that everyone else has got a strategy. And it just depends on what step of that strategy they're on, but everybody's going to be increasing the quality of their visualization strategy just immediately, really.
A key thing you touched on there, which was interesting, you've had demos out on site with clients, and you've spotted issues there and then which have had to put a halt to certain things on site.
Yep.
Do you think certain legislation in the industry may help trigger people? So things like the Building Safety Act, that is something that people have to get right. Do you think stuff like that might help see growth in this sector speed up?
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. They've got the health and safety. We've got, we did some presentations not too long ago with regards to fire safety, which is another really good one. Now, I've seen some great examples of companies reviewing their data in these hazardous environments. And that sounds really strange. Like, what do they set it alight? No, what they do is they'll take the CAD data and they will simulate different hazardous scenarios and just look at what the situation is. So, for example, the beauty of being able to do things in a digital environment are that we can look at the extreme examples. What is it like if it's really smoky and there's a fire? How can we see all of the exit signs? What's that actually going to look like? Now, no one's really going to, as a designer, should I say, you're going to see what that extreme condition's like unless it actually happens firsthand. Whereas in VR, we can flick on a switch and we could make the environment extremely smoky or foggy to simulate the difficulties someone would have. Other things we can do is, I call it empathy design. That's the name I'm calling it. I'm sticking with it. But what empathy design allows us to do is to change the reviewer into different personas. So, what's it like to be in this environment if you're 6'7"? What's it like to be in this environment when you're, 3'2" as a child? Now, what's the experience of trying to kind of navigate the environment? What are the different experiences the 6'7" person's going to have versus the child height? What if I'm in a wheelchair? And what can I reach? What are the human factors which I haven't considered? These are things which are brilliant to do inside of VR and to identify lots of different issues that you might not necessarily do if you were just following the black and white text in legislation. Because as well as I do, companies can be extremely heavy on legislation. They can have the best CRM system, the best PDL system, use the best cloud solutions, still have problems on site. And this is a really good way to actually identify a few more. Not saying it's a silver bullet that solves everything, but it definitely makes you just that 1% better.
Yeah, and I think it helps people, like you said earlier, you have to assume everybody else has a strategy around it. If you want your buildings to be the best they can be, the best for the residents, that's sort of the way forward. And if that's probably one of the key things to help people get on board with strategizing this kind of stuff. And you sort of touched on a little bit around AI right now, but is there anything you could expand on a bit more and maybe how that could relate into some of the smart buildings?
Big topic. A really big topic. So there's two areas which I think are very interesting as it relates to construction and architecture. So we've got the user experience. So typically, health and safety is a good one. So typically, we would put ourselves into the environment and to try to identify opportunities to improve the design through the prism of health and safety. Something which is going to sound a bit strange maybe to some people is the idea of using AI agents. And that phrase might not even make any sense, but imagine being able to put thousands and thousands of digital characters into your environment and just see what they do. Because we can't do that normally.
Bit like The Sims.
Yeah. Think of it like The Sims. Think of it like The Sims. But being able to do that means that you would sort of see all of these hazards that we may not have factored in, and see all of these different scenarios that we may not have had the opportunity to consider. Put people of every single various different height, every single demographic, different regions, and just put them into the scene, give them a little bit of a task and see how they get on. Now, the reason why that's quite interesting is because this is how a lot of the AI tools work through these, I guess, evolutionary algorithms. I don't want to get too technical. And they essentially learn by repetition. It's almost taking a little bit of that concept, but applying it to the scenes that we're creating. Could never have done this in 2D data because we don't have all of the assets, we don't have all the information available. But with 3D assets, this will be, for me, just as important as doing a CFD study or an FEA study or a light analysis study where we're trying to look at how the light moves through the glass, just for argument's sake, over the course of a day. These are things that you can fundamentally only do with 3D data, but with AI agents, I think there's a whole other level of what I'd call simulation for design that we can enable that we haven't really considered or thought about just yet. I don't want to see it's here right now, but there are tools available that can actually allow us to do some of this, and I would expect to see it become far more accessible. I want to say years, but things are moving so quick, I'd probably say months.
Mm-hmm. That kind of leads nicely into the next question. What are the upcoming developments that you think are going to excite people and accelerate adoption in this area? So you said that it could be months, could be years, but yeah, is there anything else coming up?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that we're kind of experiencing a bit of a sort of Cambrian explosion for technology. It's hard to put dates and times on things because the speed of innovation here is so quick, and it's so, I guess, ubiquitous across all the sectors that we support. But I've seen things where to create visualizations, there's a really great app for Revit, which allows you to take a very simple structure and create multiple renderings using stable diffusion. Amazing. There's a number of designers in architecture that I know who, to be honest, you can actually see them posting regularly from Zaha Hadid, who are using Midjourney to create different variations of the design. So it's just increasing the design funnel. But I think that's the bit which everyone's going to be doing very soon. The interesting things for me are going to be using AI to essentially check your design versus legislation. That sounds really strange, but I'm almost certain, based on what I've seen recently, that there are going to be routines that can be run which will read through legislation in a given country and then look at your design to see how feasible it is, and it will come up with recommendations. Now, that sounds really strange, but from what I've seen, it's not actually too far away. And I think things like this will be quite impactful for designers of all levels. So if you're a junior designer, all of a sudden you've got the knowledge and wisdom to evaluate your design based on very specific, legislative information. If you're an experienced designer who really knows what they're doing, this means that you could probably branch out a little bit more and I guess push the envelope a little bit, because you can then just run very quick routines to almost evaluate it based on legislation. But also, if you're an experienced person, you can almost review it based on what you would do. So you're almost putting in your own parameters and your own fine tuning. So you've almost got a sidekick, which is you. So I think from a productivity and efficiency standpoint, this is a huge amount of excitement around designing with legislation or sector-specific conditions in mind using AI. So I'm trying really hard not to say the name of the companies, but that's something which is very close.
So watch this space, soon coming.
Yeah, I think so.
Excellent. Well, yeah, it's definitely given us all a lot of food for thought. And just to finish up, I suppose, what's in the pipeline for you? Is there any projects coming up that you can maybe share a bit of insight with?
Across the board, automotive?
Yeah, across the board, just what you're doing in general here at Symetri.
Yeah, so I think things have continued with startups. I'm very passionate about what we're doing with automotive startups, and I'm now starting to get far more traction with our architecture and construction clients as well. I'm probably on a few too many, but I'm on several innovation boards now, the steering groups, which is helping me to get a wider level of visibility of the various different challenges that companies are having. And I think based on all of the innovation that's happening at the same time, this should serve Symetri very well. Not just me, but the entire business, because of all that different disciplines that we have. This is the time to really kind of condense it and deploy it with the assistance of AI, because previously we had a certain amount of bandwidth to be able to try new things out, whereas our development team are coding a little bit quicker using Copilot. Viz team are being able to review things quicker using Stable Diffusion, DALL-E, and Midjourney. So the exciting thing is essentially we've suddenly unlocked a huge amount of bandwidth, and I would encourage all of our clients to dip their toe in the water a little bit with the AI stuff, but also to contact us if they've got any questions around the AI and visualization in particular, but AI in general. I would say it's a great time to talk to us and to talk internally, because I've never seen anything move as quickly as it is now, and I've been working with design technology for nearly 15 years, right at the cutting edge. But this is laughing in the face of annual releases and updates. It's just week after week after week, the whole space is evolving. So yeah,
and we're seeing loads of stuff that you're posting on LinkedIn. It's just so exciting, amazing. So yeah, if you guys want to keep up, make sure you follow Nick as well for all the exciting innovations coming up. Well, I think that's all we have time for today, but it sounds like we'll definitely need a follow-up in a few months' time to see just how much it's changed again since. But thank you so much.
No, thanks a lot. Much appreciated for the invite.